Good afternoon, Dr. Dave.
Good afternoon, Dr. Joe.
How are you doing, man?
Most excellent, sir. How have you been?
Not too bad. Just the weather's been kind of crazy, but other than that, it's been pretty good.
Yep. It's definitely the weather here in the Southwest has been surprisingly wet. Not
Oh,
the
okay.
torrential downpours that we're used to, 15, 20 minutes of hurricane weather and then flash flooding. Instead, we're getting more of a deeper, slower soaking rain. So that's always a positive.
Okay. Well, cool. Very cool. All right. So we'll kind of sidetrack all of that business and we'll talk about the reason why we're here. So welcome to our viewers and listeners to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. We really appreciate you tuning in week after week to hear what me and Dave have to say. So for this particular episode, we're going to talk about above and beyond or going above and beyond and what that really means. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Dave for him to kind of kick us off.
Yeah, so going above and beyond, that's a good one. There's definitely pros and cons to that one. Um, there's some risk and reward associated with it. I suppose you could do a gap analysis or something like that and really get carried away with
Right.
it. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this topic. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to go above and beyond. Doesn't necessarily have to be materialistically, or sometimes it can just be being there, can be going above and beyond sometimes. So yeah, I'm excited to jump into this one, Joe. Excited
Okay.
to jump into it.
All right. So with that, like Dave said, there are many aspects of going above and beyond. And so I really think about, my dad back in the day when growing up. And I was so impressed by him. He was probably the most intelligent, hardworking man that I know. And I've said this before, he had a limited education, just a ninth grade education, but you would have never known that just by the way he carried himself. And so anything he did, he always wanted to go over the top. And so in a lot of cases, that's what I've tried to emulate or try to duplicate, which
Mhm.
I still commend him on his ability to do that because um, oftentimes, and I'll admit this, that for me, I see it as, if I can't go above and beyond, or I'm not going to be able to give it my best, and then in some cases, then I won't try it, which is unfortunate,
Mhm.
because you get in that mindset of always going above and beyond, and then you kind of lock yourself in that idea of that end state, and so um, yeah, it just once you get into that mode of always going above and beyond, it's really hard to say I'm just going to just do it just to get it done. And so that's where this all started for me, or where I noticed, the importance of going above and beyond. And like I said, my dad was um, not educated formally, but he was very smart, very intelligent. And for him, there was nothing he couldn't tackle. And so in a lot of cases and it may just been simple tasks or chores, but the way he approached it, it was always giving it his best. And that's the
Yeah.
same thing I passed on to my kids, that not just being average, not just being like everybody else, but always putting in that extra work to make sure that you are providing the best results that you can in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, those are some great points, Joe. Some of that stuff does resonate with me, especially, the attitudinal piece about, always giving 110%,
Right.
although I guess once you give 100%, is there anything technically more than 100%? Because can your glass be 120% full? I
Right.
guess it could,
Right.
but it's overflowing. So,
Right. Right. Right.
but that does take some effort to sustain that level
Yeah.
of what's a good word?
Performance.
Performance, just energy level. I mean, that
Right.
takes a
Yeah.
lot of
Yep.
energy, a lot of focus, to be able to perform at that level all the time. And kind of on the flip side of that, that can also generate a lot of stress for someone. I mean,
Absolutely.
and that can be good or bad. Some people operate very well and efficient under stress. Some people actually deliberately procrastinate, I guess you could say. because they know that, if they start off, you have something due on Friday and it's only going to take you a few hours, they know that if they do it Monday, it's just not going to work. So they will
Right.
wait till Thursday or Friday
Yeah.
to do it because that's their optimal way to perform. For other folks, though, it can create a lot of personal and professional stress. So it just
Oh,
depends on
absolutely.
you as a person. And to Joe's point, selecting those things or tasks or ideas or projects that you want to take on, which of those you're going to be comfortable with giving 100%. And to the kind of another flip side, this is a multi-sided coin, so maybe it's more like a die. Um, is wow, I just fell off that train of thought. We'll come back to it, I guess. But what was the other side of that? Yeah, I don't know. But they're the some of the benefits are, you know, with going above and beyond is the recognition piece of it. I mean, some people like that recognition. Some people are
Right. Right.
just do it because that's who they are. It's
Right.
ingrained in them that if they're going to do something, they're all in. They don't just,
Right.
you
Right.
know, half-ass something. And I remembered I'm back on that train.
Okay.
Um, and when is 100% too much? And we've talked about this before offline. Sometimes going above and beyond isn't necessary, or there's a cost or timing factor associated in it where it becomes non-value added, or it's perceived as
Right.
non-value
Yep.
added to
Yep.
go, well, 70% is good enough. We don't want you to go 100% because that extra 20 or 30 or 10% is non-value added to the client.
And that's a very good point, Dave. And that was kind of the path I was going to go down when you were kind of trying to regroup. But that's the side of it I was thinking of. What is your version of above and beyond, and when does that start to conflict or
Right.
start to not make sense to do that? And
Yeah.
that's a very good point. Like you said, um, and me and you have definitely had this conversation multiple times over the years. It's just,
Absolutely.
how far do you go with it? And it does sometimes turn into procrastination, overthinking, all those types of things because
Overexertion, mental
yeah,
and
because
physical.
you're trying to get it perfect in
Yeah.
your eyes, or and in other people's eyes, it's great. So that's the one side of it. We have to really look at the scope of what we're
Mhm.
trying to achieve. And to your point, does that stop at 70% for you? And because everybody else sees it as 95, 100%. And so
That's a good
that's a
point.
very good thing that needs to be defined before you start down this
Yeah.
path, because you can go way over the top. And I think that's, like I said, me and David talked about this for so long. It just, that's been, I think, one of our biggest hindrances is that we, overthink it. We oversimplify it. We just do so many things that cause us to pause and add undue stress, all those
Mhm.
types of things. So I think that's really important, that you define what that really looks like, that success factor for.
Yeah, the parameters is really, and the
Right.
constraints is really key because, we have to take into consideration cost and time if it's for
Right.
a company and potentially for ourselves. And, the productivity, at what point
Yeah.
does our productivity start to actually wane because we're over focused or hyper focused and we
Right.
get distracted from doing other things that we should be paying attention to, or
Yeah.
dedicating time to. And unfortunately, that can result on the negative side to people actually, you know taking time away from their personal life or their family when they need them there because they're so focused on this project or work. Or we've all heard workaholic, or
Right.
people that work 90 to 100 hours a week, and some people can do that, some people can't. And my question is, and I think it's a question for a lot of people, how sustainable is that?
Right. Right. Yeah.
At what point is that much too much for a person? And there's that tipping point where it starts negatively impacting their personal lives or their performance at work, or relationships internal and external to a company. So there are definitely some downsides to going above and beyond. Some of the
Right.
positive sides, though, you can get a lot of positive recognition. It can demonstrate that you're a subject matter expert, or at least an expert for that particular task. It
Right.
can really over satisfy a customer, internal or external, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, we've
Right.
heard of underselling and over delivering, and that the other side of that is overselling and under delivering. That's never a good one.
Right.
We're going
Right.
to give you a
Right.
Cadillac, and then there's a, you know, beat up, you know, junk car sitting in their parking lot.
Right. Right. Right.
So
So I think you brought up a good point just about the entire balance. You said it earlier with balance and family, but at the same time, that balance also becomes important as far as, like you said, measuring what's above and beyond, and
right.
whether it makes sense to do that. So, we've really been talking mainly about some of the negatives associated with going above and beyond. But like Dave said, there's also some key points that are good, or pros to this whole process. The recognition piece, for me, a lot of times it's the satisfaction that I know I did,
Yeah.
you know, the best that I could do, went above and beyond what was called for, because then I know I can honestly sit back and say, yeah, I did give it my best. Because then that goes to the point or fact that some people may not view it as being, this great thing, but I can still walk away saying, I did everything I could, and I in my eyes, I went above and beyond. And so that's that other piece of that, trying to satisfy other people. And I
Yeah.
bring that up because, my kids played in sports and did all these different things. And there was a moment when my oldest son was, really young, playing basketball, and we're at halftime and we're just shooting around, and I went over to him and he started crying, and I was like, why are you crying? He said, I'm doing everything I can, but we're not winning. I can't. I said, listen, are you doing everything you can to win? Are you, not holding back any of those things? And he said, yes. I said, well, you've already gone above and
Yeah.
beyond. There's no more that we can expect out of you. And he was about 10 years old at that time. But from that, brief conversation with him, he went back out there, and I could see him have fun again. So it's just, kind of back to your point with the stress thing, the, overemphasizing, helping him realign that or balance, that, hey, I am doing the best that I can. And that's what I always told my kids, as long as you can walk away saying, I did my best, then it shouldn't matter what the outcome is, whether you win or lose, or how other people view it. Because if you know that you and your heart gave everything, then that's your judgment. It's not up to anybody else to judge you. It didn't look like you gave 100% if you know that you did that. So
Yeah.
that's the other piece of that balance that.
It's interesting you say that. I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because for me, I like to go above and beyond to make sure that I'm satisfying the customer. Because if I just
Right.
meet those requirements, my concern is there's still a gray area on either side where they're going to say, "Oh, you did really well," or "Oh, you just missed it." So I'd rather, within the scope and you know the constraints that are available, I try to go a little bit above and beyond because I want to make sure that not only is my customer satisfied, but I want them to go away with a really great experience, not just a good one, you
But
know?
but I still go back to kind of what we said, though. If we rely on them to make that call that this is
Yeah,
great or not, then we're still could be that, that carrot could still be dangled out in front of us. Yeah, it's
true.
good, but it's not great. And
Nah,
and
yeah,
and that's why I go back to the point, the conversation I have with my kids all the time was, if you feel like you've done your best, if you don't have any regrets, then again, you can't allow someone else to say, well, that might have
right.
been your best, but this is not good enough for me. Because
Yeah,
again, it goes back to our own definition
sure.
of success, and above and beyond. And again, not just, if you're playing a game or if you're doing something and you just go one move forward, one move further, and now you've done your best. I agree, that's not your best. But if you've gone, this game says stop at 75, you go to 95, then yeah, you've probably exceeded those expectations. But again, we have to be really careful, that we don't allow someone else to dictate what that
Yeah.
is.
And
And so
that's
that's
a fair statement, because, we've already put the pressure on ourselves
on it.
to
Exactly.
go above and
Exactly.
beyond, whatever that above and beyond looks like. It doesn't, above and beyond, we want to be clear, above and beyond does not mean 100% of the time, or
Right.
perceivably more than 100%, more than 100% of the time. So, it's important to understand, like we've discussed, that maybe 70% is above and beyond, because maybe the expectation is only to be 50% done with the project by Friday, and maybe we're at 70. That's above and beyond. That's,
Right. Right.
and maybe that's all your schedule allows you to do, or your own personal energy level, or your
Right.
task, your list of tasks and to do items, and your prioritization. Maybe that's all you can do for that week, and that's okay. So, going above and beyond, there's a lot of pieces to it. It's, some people think, oh, you got to go above and beyond. And to Joe's point, well, who's measuring this above and beyond? Is it me,
Right.
or is it someone else? And that's important to understand.
Right. Yeah. So I just, again, for me, that's been my kind of approach to this, is this really getting that definition of what 100% is or 75% is. And then, yeah, going above in your eyes of, going above and beyond what that is. But I just really think it's important that you get that definition or explanation of what
Yeah.
that
The expectation of it. Yep.
yeah, again, because you could be chasing, and that's that's the conversation we've had. You can continue to chase it to make it perfect, and then you give it to the customer, and they're like, man, this is way more than what I thought. So it's really a good idea to figure that out before you really go down that path, because you could be going down that path, and like I say, it might call for the 75% version, and you go 100%, and they're like, that's really,
It's
we don't even
overkill,
need it.
or
Yeah,
it's
we're gonna chop
unneeded,
that portion off
or
because
yeah,
it's
we're
just
going to
not
take it, we're
needed.
going to remove it. Or maybe they want 75% for a reason, because anything over that puts them into a realm. Like if we start talking
Right.
about
Yeah.
specifications, maybe that's outside of their scope, or
Right. Yep.
outside of the allowable limitations.
Right.
You know, Joe and I both have experience in the defense industry with defense contractors, and if they say 5.5 millimeters, well, I'm going to go above and beyond and give them 6. No, they want 5.5
Right.
millimeters,
Right.
not 4.9,
Right.
not 5.6, 5.5.
Yeah. No, so that's a very good example of, you want to give more, but more is not
Not
necessarily going to be a benefit or a gain. So
correct. Yeah.
so yeah, we've talked a lot about just, I think, really defining what that means to you and to others, because you could be the person with all the energy in the room, but that could far exceed everybody else's level of
Mhm.
energy in the room. So again, there is the appropriate time to go above and beyond, versus always doing that 100% of the time, like Dave
Yeah.
mentioned, because you can burn yourself out. You can't, and I think I reached that point a couple of years ago, right after my retirement from the military. I was kind of in this. For one, it was a transition for me, a huge transition, which I didn't realize at the time. But I started reflecting on, especially the past 7 to 10 years at that point in 2020, and I really started looking at, man, I was really still was in awe of how I was accomplishing, doing all those things at that time, and I realized it did come at a cost, because it just, for a period of time, about 6 months after my retirement, I was struggling with, so what do I do now? What's, should I be doing something else? Am I missing something? So it was a lot of self doubt and concern that I wasn't reaching my potential, I wasn't doing all the things I was supposed to. And so for that, yeah, that first 6 months after retirement was really challenging for me, because I had I had operated for the most part, and you said at the very beginning, with that sense of urgency always, and that sense of not procrastination necessarily, but that sense of, got to be doing something. I've got
Yeah.
to have the, my energy level to this point. And like, so I was running on all cylinders all the time. And it really did shocked me. Like I said, once that huge part of my life being in the military was gone, it that really, I had to sit back and then really start to look at what that really meant going forward. So
Yeah, I can relate to some of that. I think about when I was working full time and going to school full time,
yep,
and having a family,
right,
you
yep,
know, and and I think about that. I reflect upon that now, and I'm like, I honestly don't think I could do it now, and I
right,
don't know how.
exactly,
And I
yep,
think back, how did I do it then?
yep,
So as you mature, not age, but as you mature
right,
and you start understanding yourself better, you start recognize what your own limitations are, physical, mental, and emotional, and understanding at what times you can really tap into that and go really deep and then really take advantage of that. And other times when you really need to back off. And as we
right,
talked about before, refill that gas tank and rest up and, build that energy level back up, because 100% of the time is not sustainable
no,
for an
not at
entirety,
all, right,
and it's really becomes a detriment. So,
absolutely,
in
yeah,
the last few minutes, I'm just going to wrap up my side real quick. There's pros and cons to going above and beyond, and that doesn't mean, you know, working 90 hours a week and just to do your normal job. There are recognitions that come with it. There are, monetary rewards that can come with it. There's job opportunities that can come about. There can be respect and, a bunch of other things like that, when we talk about motivation, that those external motivation factors that are really driving people to do things in a positive way. The caveat that I just want to reiterate is make sure you keep that balance going so you don't run out of fuel and crash and burn. So
that's a very good point, Dave. That balance piece is very important, and that, as I was telling my story about the military transition, that was the biggest thing for me, understanding that balance, and it took me several months to figure that balance out, and to also figure out that it wasn't necessary.
yeah,
And because it turned into a detriment because of that exertion, like you said, the family, the going to school, the almost 20 of your hours are occupied by something, and that eventually will wear and tear on you. So that's the first thing with going above and beyond. The second thing is, again, to help make sure you define what those expectations are
yeah,
for
set that
yourself and
criteria.
for whatever you're doing. Again, something, not everything takes above and beyond as far as to
Yeah,
that max limit. Just understanding what environment you're in, your audience, your project, whatever it is, to really take time and really evaluate what that means. If you're assigned at your kid's school as the PTA, whatever it is or whatever they call it now, but you're assigned a project, and then you have this go in at all costs, and everybody else doesn't. So just really evaluate what that looks like, if you're gonna go all in and above and beyond. So with that, we do appreciate you tuning in and watching or listening to this episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. And until next time, we encourage you to continue being your not so ordinary you.